Hello and welcome back to my devlog for Project Ambrosia. So in this devlog, what I've done is I've set up an outline for targeted NPCs. So the idea is you'll be able to move into a cell, get an idea of what NPCs are actually in that cell, and then be able to use a key to target through them, and then eventually be able to interact with those NPCs in some way, right? And being unfamiliar with how to best do that, I just scoured YouTube and I settled on a technique that was recorded upon by a YouTube channel named Unreal CG. So shout out to Unreal CG for helping me start this. And here is the material that he presents. It's got a color node, a multiply, two-sided nodes. The basic gist is that you get a more of a see-through thing where you only see the inside of an object essentially, and that works out later on because y- when you implement this, what you do is you make a copy of the mesh that you want the outline on, and then you create a kind of a slightly larger scale than that mesh that you want to actually put an outline on. And this type of a shader makes it to where you're not showing the outer faces of that mesh so that it doesn't like make it look like a bigger red version of that shader, right? It just shows the insides, and therefore it actually does a really good job of outlining. So I took this and per his channel suggestion, I made an instance and I made it pink at a 0.5 scale, and then I used it on my actor NPC here. So what I did was I added a outline mesh here. And this outline mesh is just nested under mesh, and it has the same mesh shape added onto it. So wherever the mesh goes, the outline mesh goes because it's nested under it, just like the nameplate. And then I also added the outline material instance to it. And then that allowed me to use it within my event graph. And I set up two more event system events, and that allowed me to just whenever anything that calls this actor without having to cast or anything like that, you just call NPC focus and NPC blur on this actor, and it'll toggle the visibility of that outline mesh. And of course, that mesh is defaulted to invisible. So basically, you call the right events on this, and it'll hide and show that outline. And that's all it cares about. Then we hop to where things get a little bit more complicated, but once I press T, it fires a multi-box trace by channel, which is basically a ray trace or line trace, but in the shape of a box. And the intended result of this is that when I fire it, the box is big enough to cover the cell, should be big enough to cover any NPC that's within that cell. So now that that's the case, it basically just fires it in one pixel direction. Whenever that happens, I just clear the list of tile NPCs on the tile that I'm on, empty it out, and then for each one of those, I add to the array. Now I'm adding unique here because I found that when I did this raycast, it returned multiples of the same actor. So this just makes sure that that doesn't happen. Maybe there's a way to avoid that. I'm assuming because it's like moving one pixel, it's recording the first hits once and then recording the first hits again for that one pixel, and that's why they came back like this. Maybe, I'm not totally sure, but that's my theory right now. So then this tells me how many are in the array, and it should be 3 when we come to the actual uh, gameplay here. So then when I hit cycle forward through the targets, which on my keyboard is the right key, right arrow key, it's going to increment the NPC index, which starts off at -1 by default. And I'll just tell you why in a sec why I did that. We check to see if the tile NPCs has that index. If it does, we check to see if there's a focused NPC already selected. And if it does, we tell it to blur, basically. We tell that actor to blur, and we continue on with the logic to focus the new NPC. And then if we're at an invalid index, we just go through and clear the blur. We fire a blur event on all the NPCs in my list so that just in case there's some kind of condition that leaves like 2 going, this will come in and just make sure that they're all unfocused. When we're past the array limit of this array. And then we come back through after setting it back to -1. And basically at the end of your target list, you get no focus, so that there's a chance to actually not focus and move on to the next tile or do something like that, right? So with that in place, it's pretty simple at that point. Hope I'm getting across that using these actors, these invoke on actors methods, makes it really easy just to tell. Like, I didn't have to cast to the NPC actor. I just had to just generically tell it, hey, just fire this event within itself, and it didn't have to like pull in a reference to the NPC actor to this blueprint, which means that there's less things to import, less memory to take up to run this actual Ambrosia player pawn. So it's a great system to use. I almost defaulted to an interface, but I found that I didn't have to. I just had to use this the right way, and you're good to go. So here we go. As you can see. Now, I'm not sure why these are here. Maybe I have to rebuild the lighting or something like that. I should still be able to move like I could before. But if I press T, the hits are the red boxes on the spheres you see. Those are the NPCs. And then now that I have my list of targets available, I can hit right, and it turns on that mesh that serves as the outline. If I hit right again, that's the second one it hit, and that's the third one it hit. Now, I don't know what the rhyme or reason is for why it didn't go from left to right like you would expect, but ultimately don't really mind that this is the case. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, and then it goes to non-blur. And if I target here, where there's no things to hit, nothing gets focused on, and then we go back down, focus again. So it works stupendously, and I can't wait to expand on this. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you next time.